Hello, everyone. This is Professor Prince again, and this is another one of the makeup just in case videos. This is the lecture about monotype printmaking, and we're going to look at the process and some historical and contemporary examples. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I can do this while talking, and we're going to jump right in and get this going. All right, so hopefully there now you can see my screen and you can see the slides. Monotype printmaking. We're starting with monotype printmaking this semester because it's a great opportunity for us to jump in, play around very quickly with learning more about inks, mixing colors, as well as layering different marks and textures, which is going to be one of our big goals. Some of the examples that I'll show you today are largely in black and white, but of course, that does not have to be the case. So hopefully you already know, and we discussed it a little bit last class, monotype basically means one impression, right? Mono, one type, we refer to it as impression or print. So monotype is this sort of interesting hybrid, sometimes referred to as the painterly print, because it doesn't have the same kind of matrix and the repeatability that linoleum cut, dry point, and screen printing and other types of printmaking do. So we have this great image of someone in the studio at work on a monotype here to get us started. So basically we can kind of break monotypes down into a couple of different categories. One is the reductive monotype, and this is the case where an artist lays down a flat of ink and uses different tools to pull away the ink and get lines, marks, textures, tonal values, etc. Here you see someone using what looks to be a Q-tip to wipe away ink. Again, this is in black and white, but the ink could be any color. Similar, but a little different is trace monotypes. With the trace monotype, the artist lays down a flat of ink, lays a sheet of paper down on top of it, and then uses a ballpoint pen or other drawing tool, even their fingers, to pull the ink off and transfer it to the paper. No printing press is needed for this. And here you can see someone pulling things back to look. Now, what's really great, and I love trace monotypes because you get two different prints from it, right? You get the print that you're with the transference to paper, but then you can see the ink that's still left on that plate that could make a print as well. The next type of monotype is an additive monotype. So if reductive is putting ink down and taking it away, additive is actually modifying the ink and painting directly on the plate with it, as you see this artist doing here. And one of the things that we can play around with and consider is how with monotypes, we have the original impression and then we have a ghost. So we see here the original, which is much darker, has a lot more impact. And then we see the softer ghost, which has pulled that residual ink off the plate. So that allows for kind of a generative quality, and some artists will actually work back into that residual ink on the plate. All right, so let's look at the history of monotypes. The first artist that we really know, or who at least is credited with starting to do monotypes, is the Italian artist Giovanni Battista Castiglione. And forgive me if I pronounced that incorrectly. And he is known for his dark field monotypes. So of course, this would have been a reductive process where ink was laid down and scratched into. And I think you can see that very clearly in the detail here. Okay, so he's considered to be the first. And we kind of see monotypes kind of happening really, in all honesty, in coordination with intaglio and other printmaking processes. So in the 17th century, etching was very powerful. A lot of artists were starting to do it. And so you probably have heard about this artist, right? Rembrandt. And this is an example of not a monotype, but a monoprint. So the nuanced difference is a monoprint does have a repeatable matrix of some sort included in it. So in this case, with Rembrandt's Entombment, the image here on the left is a clean wipe of that etched plate. On the right, though, Rembrandt has decided to treat the plate more like a monotype and leave lots of dark passages of ink on the plate. So this upper area here that's really dark, he's not gone in and etched and filled things in. He's just let the ink set on the plate and then selectively wiped out this area. So we should keep that in mind, that there is that kind of dialogue in the history of printmaking between monotypes and then monoprints, which have the matrices in them, and that they sort of needed each other to get going. All right. By the time, though, we get into the 1800s, the 19th century, we find a few artists who went crazy with monotypes and artists who really revolutionized the media. One of those is Degas, and you may have from art history class recognized Degas immediately from his dancers. So Degas did a lot of reductive monotypes, and he really took it to an extreme, getting lots of tonal passages, dealing with the texture. I mean, we really get this kind of textural quality of the tutus coming through. He also did additive, he did ghost, he allowed himself to play and enjoy the process. And then several of his monotypes were reworked, and he added pastel back on top to get more color involved. So you can see that here, that the blue that's been applied is actually pastel on top of the monotype. And Degas did that, and other artists continue to do that. I've even done that in my work of pulling a monotype. It's just not quite there. Reworking it with graphite, charcoal, colored pencils can actually be a very legitimate way to work. So, and I should say, I am still here in Austria recording this. So if you hear this weird me, kind of like the minion sound, that's actually, I'm not too far away from a police station and I have the windows open. So that might be what you're hearing. I hear it right now. All right, let's keep going though with this lecture. So we've already talked about, we saw the example of the artist working on trace monotype. The artist who is given credit for, if you will, inventing or maybe finding out about trace monotype is Gauguin. So you can see here, and as we look at these, you can see the different marks that Gauguin made based on the type of tool that he used and how much ink transfers. So, and we should also say not just the tool, but the pressure put on the tool. So if we look at these thicker lines here around the hair, most likely maybe a pin of some sort with heavier pressure, whereas the soft tonal qualities here on the figures, maybe just using his fingers to add pressure. And I'll show you when we do the demonstration for trace monotypes, how to set yourself up so you can peek and see what happens. And we see that even more here, that contrast, the thick, heavier contour line around the figure versus the softer kind of tonal passages that show us the contours of her back. I think Gauguin did a really beautiful job with these, and Gauguin and Degas both really love the immediacy of monotype. And I think that's something you should be thinking about as you're seeing these examples and thinking about your work, is that immediacy and how, mark immediately can transfer to paper. It can allow you to be a little bit free and have some fun. And here is an example of an additive monotype by Gauguin, a very similar feel, just created in the additive process and with a little bit more color. Okay. Another artist who made a lot of monotypes was Matisse. And Matisse really is doing something with monotypes that's somewhat similar to a line drawing, but in reverse. So this is a reductive monotype where he's put a black field of ink down and scratched it away. And you can really see that here with this image of the apples, where he would have maybe, in my imagination, it was the backside of a paintbrush that he used to scratch this line away. And to get these kind of delicate drawn marks. Now, this is a beautiful process to do. It's a little bit tricky because if your ink layer has to be just right. If you have too much ink and you run this through the press, the ink will collapse in on itself and you will lose your line. So it's all about getting just the right amount of ink on the plate. Okay, so there are some historical examples. We started off with the first Italian printmaker, who we know or who gets credited for making monotypes. We saw Degas, who really took reductive monotypes and ran with them. Gauguin, who's known for introducing or inventing trace monotypes, and then Matisse's silvery, delicate, reductive line monotypes. So now I want to look at some contemporary examples of artists who've been working very recently with monotypes. And a few of these will also be monoprints. Okay, we'll see if we can catch it. So the first artist is Michael Mazur. So Michael Mazur works in print and painting primarily. He was based in the Northeast of the United States. And this is a self-portrait that combines both that kind of trace monotype and kind of a reductive technique. So we can also imagine, right, that there's probably a complementary piece to this, that the lines for the face were made from that trace monotype. And he did a lot of reductive monotypes as well. Flowers, we saw this last class, animals. He really exploits the gestural kind of quality as well as the tonal range that one can get from reductive monotypes. And you can imagine the different tools that he used, maybe a paper towel or cloth, Q-tips, the back of a brush, things like that. But because he is a painter as well, he also created monotypes that, just like a painting, have a layering of color. I'm talking with my hands, a layer of color and abstract engagement as well. So Michael is a great artist to look at. One of the things that he's most known for is for doing a series of prints based on Dante's The Inferno. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to look him up. So let's keep going. Grady Gordon is originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he has been making this fun series of kind of monsters faces that exploit the mark making of monotypes to create these, I don't know, ephemeral, intriguing figures. So I think you can definitely get a sense here of the variety of marks that you can do with a reductive process. We can imagine that he used the side of a brush, there's small little, so he really, I think, has a lot of fun, and texture becomes a huge part of this. This one that feels like, to me, kind of a werewolf sort of form. And we can imagine, because we don't see any other tone on here, that maybe Grady started with marking things out or just wipe the plate clean. So they're all about creating characters. I think there's an element of dark humor to some of these, but he's really exploring what you can do with a reductive monotype. Cochi Yamamoto is actually a printmaking professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And he makes large-scale atmospheric monotypes where he's actually it's kind of like a dance with the roller. He's actually using very large, and I'm doing like this, very large rollers, and using them to make marks and shapes and forms. So instead of using small brayers, some of the rollers that he uses are up to 2 to 3 feet in diameter and oftentimes 2 to 3 feet long. And so one of the things that we'll find and we can play around with when we're rolling out ink, either with a roller or a brayer, is the differences in how the ink will be put down by the edge. And that is one thing that Cochi exploits. So we can see how he's laid down the ink and then used the edge of the roller to kind of either deposit more or pull back ink. So they're large, they're atmospheric. He plays around with subtleties of color to make these mysterious environments, but he's making marks that are specific to the tools of printmaking. And I think that's what makes these really cool. And when I say these are large, some of these are multiple feet large, okay? And a lot of the space just coming through just in how the tonality of the ink, you know, so that lightness, brightness back here gets closer to the tone of the paper, contrast this area here, and all of a sudden we have this deep kind of sense of landscape. Really, really impressive and beautiful. All right. I'm going to keep going. I hope this is getting you guys excited. I really like to share and look at artists before we really get started on the process, so you can see examples and ideas, and hopefully at least one, maybe two or three of these artists are making ideas, the light bulb go off for you. Elizabeth Newman got her MFA from the School of the Art Institute, and she works as a sculptor, but she also does a series of, or has regularly done monotypes. So it's, for her, it's about looking to the print for a different way of working to inspire her sculptural practice and to get back down to basics. So as she says, I draw directly into ink place with toothpicks, hair combs, or sticks, incising scratch lines, sometimes with free hands, often tracing from the underside of objects I have brought in from my studio. Each print ends up with the skin of multiple layers of line and color. A bed of energetic lines of geometry and alignment, whirling circles, ovals, spirals, eggs, balls, paws, dots, all reference plant life and a mapping of the female body. Okay, so I think you can definitely see all of those kind of things coming through here. There's a density of color from the layering. The quality of drawing that she's talking about is coming through here. So this one I think is really gorgeous, and let's just look at it for a minute. I'm really confident that what we're looking at are a couple of different trace layers of monotypes put on top of each other. So she's letting herself work generatively, if you will, of maybe working with a background color of green, doing a trace monotype on one piece of paper, printing that onto the ghost onto another sheet, and then taking that and layering and layering and layering. And that's what starts to make them look really engaging. They feel very mystical to me, as if I'm looking at some sort of cosmic map. Okay, so that is Elizabeth Newman. Okay. Speaking in terms of trace monotype, Jessica Ann Mills is an artist who took trace monotype way to the extreme. And so those of you who love to draw, this could be a great way for you to think about going, jumping into trace monotypes. So she is working from photographic source references of specific places. She got her MFA in printmaking from the University of Georgia. And I'm not sure, but I feel confident to say that maybe some of these are locations nearby to her. Okay, so, and you can look close, you can see the drawn quality always coming through. So, you know, she's just taking her time, building that up. And yeah, again, I'll just say this, I'll set you up when we do the demonstration for Trace Monotype, where you can check your progress and feel very comfortable in exploring this kind of process. Okay, I think these are pretty fabulous, and they have a slightly different sheen and quality to them than a graphite drawing. All right, just a couple more artists. I did talk about one of the things I want us to play with is that idea of layering. We saw it in Elizabeth Newman's work, and I think you see that here in Suzanne McLaughlin's as well. She's New York based, and she's known for her abstract works that are based on language. Okay, so she's very interested in the mechanics of vocabulary and the gap between what is heard and what is read and things of that nature. So I think we can kind of see from the marks that she made, especially through here, there's this kind of calligraphic quality that feels like to me the rhythm of handwriting and maybe of the spoken word. And again, we can imagine these as layers. We can see how this light color, light shape sets on top of the others, and the engagement, that repetition. This is the correct orientation, but it does feel like this is the word left upside down. And so it's both in the orange and it's in the yellow. Okay. So she is primarily a painter. So those marks of painting, the brush strokes, do kind of come through oftentimes in her monotypes. Okay, as does that intense use of color. So again, part of why I'm wanting to start with monotypes for us this semester is it's an easy kind of, we can all get started and start to make prints very quickly, but we can explore mixing color and layering very, very quickly. Okay, so the last artist I want to show is a little bit different because these are branching us a little bit more into some mono prints, but I feel as if we could do a lot of similar things with our monotypes. This is Sarah Smelser, who is a printmaking professor in Illinois, and her works are abstract, but they have a sensibility that's informed by cartography, cycles in nature, and mundane objects. And I think you can kind of see that here. Is that kind of a playground tool? Is that part of the body? And definitely a shape like that could be made very easily through a monotype run, and it could be layered with other shapes through simple stencils and things of that nature. If we look at this image and start to break it down, I definitely feel cartography here. It, to me, references patterns from Southwest US and native cultures there. That background could have been created with a very simple reductive monotype, and then additive and trace monotypes added on top. Okay, and something very similar here. Okay, so that wraps us up with looking at monotype printmaking. We will get started immediately on Tuesday with a quick demo and making some prints in the studio next week. So you've seen images, we've talked. So now your job is to do a little bit of research, find some more artists that resonate with you, and come up with some sketches and some ideas for what you'll do in the print shop. Take care, and I'll see you very soon.